The moment Dr. Samuel Brooks stepped into my hospital room, I felt it in my bones. 38 years in real estate had taught me how to read people, and the way his jaw tightened before he spoke told me the truth would be cruel. He held a clipboard too tightly, as if gripping it might somehow soften what he was about to say. "Mrs. Holloway," he began carefully, "I'm afraid the internal injuries from your accident are far more severe than we initially believed." I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny cracks in the plaster to steady my breathing. "How long?" I asked. Dr. Brooks hesitated, just long enough to let the weight of the answer settle. "At most 3 days, 3 days." The words didn't land all at once. They echoed, bounced around the room, then slammed into my chest with crushing force. I had survived bad markets, ruthless competitors, and decades of sacrifice. But now, at 68, my life was being reduced to a countdown. I turned my head slowly toward the foot of the bed, where my son Ethan stood beside his wife Leela. I expected tears, panic, something human. Instead, what I saw made my stomach twist. Leela raised both hands to her face and let out a dramatic sob, loud, performative, but through the narrow gaps between her fingers I saw her eyes, dry, alert, glittering, not with grief, with relief. Dr. Brooks murmured something about giving us privacy and quietly left the room. The door hadn't even clicked shut when Ethan moved closer. He took my hand, his grip tight, not comforting, not loving, almost victorious. "Well," he whispered, leaning close to my ear, "I guess this is it." His breath smelled faintly of coffee and something bitter. "It's about time," he continued. "Everything you built, it finally becomes ours." My heart skipped painfully. Before I could speak, Leela dropped the act. Her sobbing vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She walked toward the other side of my bed, her expression sharpening into something cold and calculating. "Do you know how long we've been waiting for this?" she said flatly. "The properties, the investments, the accounts, it's all just been sitting there." Ethan nodded. 7 million, give or take. Not bad for a lifetime of control, huh? They laughed. Actually laughed. I lay there, machines beeping softly around me, my body shattered from the accident that had nearly killed me, while my only child discussed my death like a business milestone. I closed my eyes, not because I was weak, but because I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. "Do you think she'll linger?" Leela asked casually. Ethan shrugged. "Doctor said coma is likely. Hopefully sooner than later. Hospitals creep me out." They began discussing logistics, how quickly the paperwork could be processed, which properties would sell fastest, and which furniture from my downtown penthouse was worth keeping. I was already dead to them. When they finally left, their footsteps fading down the hall, tears slid silently into my hairline. But beneath the pain, something else began to stir. Anger, cold, focused. Alive. An hour later, the door opened again. Dr. Brooks stepped inside, but this time his face had changed. He locked the door behind him and pulled a chair close to my bed. "Margaret," he said quietly, "I need you to listen carefully." I opened my eyes. "I heard everything," my breath caught. "And I need you to know something else," he continued. "Your condition is serious, but it isn't terminal, not in 3 days, you have time." Time. The word wrapped around my heart like armor. "I told them what I did because I needed to see who they really were," Dr. Brooks said. "And now so do you." I stared at him, the truth settling deep inside me. 3 days wasn't a death sentence. It was a test, and my son had failed it. As Dr. Brooks leaned closer and lowered his voice, I realized something chilling. If Ethan and Leela believed I was dying, they would show me exactly how far they were willing to go. And I was about to let them. Dr. Samuel Brooks didn't rush his words. He knew I needed a moment, maybe several, to absorb what he had just said. "You're telling me," I whispered, "that I'm not dying." "Not the way they think," he replied carefully. "Your injuries are serious. Broken ribs, internal trauma, long recovery, but your organs are stabilizing. With rest and proper treatment, you have months, possibly longer. Months." The word felt unreal. Only minutes ago, I had been measuring my life in hours. "Then why?" My voice trembled. "Why tell them I had 3 days?" Dr. Brooks exhaled slowly. "Because something about your son's behavior didn't sit right with me. Before I even checked on you after the accident, Ethan asked about your estate. Not your pain, not your chances of survival, your assets." The pieces began to click together, forming a picture I didn't want to see but could no longer deny. "I needed to know," he continued, "whether my suspicions were paranoia or protection." "And?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "And what you just witnessed was not shock or grief," he said grimly. "It was anticipation." I stared at the ceiling again, but this time my tears dried before they could fall. Rage was replacing sorrow, hardening my spine. "There's more," Dr. Brooks added. He pulled his phone from his pocket and placed it discreetly on my bedside table. I did some digging, quietly. My heart began to pound. Ethan has been drowning in gambling debt. Close to $900,000. Creditors, threats. Desperation, he paused. Leela's situation isn't much better. Maxed out cards, unpaid loans, luxury purchases she couldn't afford. That explained everything. The fake tears, the relief, the urgency. They don't just want your money, Dr. Brooks said softly. They need it. I swallowed hard. What do I do? A slow, deliberate smile crossed his face, not one of humor but of resolve. You use the time they think you don't have. That night, alone in the dim hospital room, I made a decision. Would not confront them. I would not expose myself too soon. Instead, I would let them believe the lie and reveal the truth themselves. The next morning, Ethan and Leela returned with a folder thick with documents. Just formalities, Ethan said sweetly, sliding them onto my bed. Insurance permissions, emergency authorizations, nothing major. I barely cracked my eyes open, feigning weakness, but I saw enough. Power of attorney, property access, bank control. I'm tired, I murmured. Tomorrow. A flicker of irritation crossed Ethan's face before his mask returned. Of course, Mom, rest. As they turned to leave, Leela glanced back at me, her eyes sharp, measuring. After they were gone, Naomi Reed, my night nurse, entered quietly. She hesitated before speaking. Mrs. Holloway, I don't want to overstep, she whispered, but I overheard something. My pulse spiked. They were talking in the hallway, she continued nervously. Your daughter-in-law said if you slipped into a coma, it would make things easier. She said some people help these things along. A chill ran through me. Naomi, I said carefully, I need you to help me. She nodded without hesitation. I already planned to. Within hours, Dr. Brooks discharged me under end-of-life home care. In front of Ethan and Leela, he repeated the lie 3 days, maybe less. They brought me home like a package already addressed. They put me in the upstairs master bedroom, away from the main living areas. Isolated, but they didn't know about the old baby monitor still hidden in my nightstand. That night, their voices drifted through the speaker. The appraiser's coming tomorrow, Leela said, and the house alone will clear nearly $3 million, Ethan replied. We're almost free. Then came the words that froze my blood. I talked to someone at the hospital, Ethan added. If she lingers, he can make sure she doesn't. I pressed record. As I listened to my son discuss my death like a scheduling problem, I realized this wasn't just greed anymore. It was something darker, and if I didn't move fast, I might not survive long enough to expose it. The first night back in my own home, I didn't sleep. I lay perfectly still beneath silk sheets I had chosen years ago, staring into the darkness while the faint hum of the baby monitor whispered betrayal into my ears. Ethan and Leela moved through the house like conquerors, no longer bothering to lower their voices. I told the appraiser to come through the back entrance, Leela said. She won't see him. She barely opens her eyes anymore, Ethan replied. Even if she does, she won't understand what's happening. I closed my eyes and let my breathing slow, forcing myself to remain calm. Panic would get me killed. Strategy might save me. The next morning, Naomi Reed arrived earlier than scheduled, her expression tight with concern. They're getting reckless, she whispered as she checked my vitals. They think time is on their side. Then we take that advantage away from them, I replied softly. I handed her an envelope hidden beneath my pillow. Inside was cash. I need 3 small cameras, I said, discreet, silent, Wi-Fi enabled. She didn't hesitate. I'll handle it. At exactly 10 o'clock, the appraiser arrived. Through the hidden camera Naomi later installed in the living room, I watched as Ethan guided the man through my home, pointing out furniture, artwork, even the piano my late husband used to play. This chandelier alone is worth $50,000, the appraiser said. Leela's smile was feral. They spoke as if I had already been buried. By afternoon, the cameras were live. Living room, dining area, study. That evening, Ethan came upstairs carrying soup I didn't ask for. How are you feeling, Mom? He asked gently. Very weak, I whispered. I don't think I'll last long. Hope flickered in his eyes. If something happens, I continued, I want you to know I trust you. Everything I have was always meant for you. The lie burned my tongue, but it worked. I love you, he said, kissing my forehead. After he left, laughter echoed down the hall. She bought it, Leela said. Later that night, through the baby monitor, I heard the words that changed everything. I paid him 10 grand already, Ethan said. The rest after it's done. When? Leela asked. Soon, I don't want to wait the full 3 days. My hands trembled as I gripped my phone and dialed Claire Donovan. I need legal protection, I said when she answered, and I need it fast. I've been expecting your call, she replied calmly. We'll expose them, but only when the evidence is airtight. The next day, I signed a new will. That night, Ethan and Leela celebrated with champagne. To freedom, Leela toasted. To finally getting what we deserve, Ethan replied. They didn't know every word was being recorded. As their laughter filled the house, I realized they believed they had already won, and that arrogance would become their downfall. By the fourth day, I perfected the art of looking weak. My hands trembled when I lifted a glass. My voice cracked when I spoke. I let my eyes drift shut mid-sentence, as if staying conscious required effort I no longer had. Ethan and Leela watched me closely, mistaking my control for decline. They didn't see calculation. That morning, Dr. Samuel Brooks arrived for what he called a routine check. In front of them, his tone was grim. Her condition has worsened, he said solemnly. 48 hours, perhaps less. Leela pressed a hand to her chest. Oh no, that's heartbreaking. I could almost admire her performance if I hadn't already seen behind the mask. After Dr. Brooks left, Ethan placed a folder on my bed. These are just some final documents, he said softly, so everything's smooth. I opened them slowly, squinting as if my vision had blurred. Property transfers, bank access, absolute authority. I can't read this, I murmured. Tomorrow. Ethan's jaw tightened, just for a second. Of course, he said, tomorrow. That night, through the living room camera, I watched them argue. She's delaying, Leela hissed. I don't like it. She doesn't have time to delay, Ethan snapped. I'll handle it. Then came the sentence that made my blood run cold. If she refuses, we move up the plan. At 11 sharp, their car pulled out of the driveway. They're heading to the casino, Naomi whispered from the doorway. Like clockwork. 10 minutes later, Claire Donovan slipped into my room, briefcase in hand. We have enough to act, she said quietly. But one more mistake from them will seal it. What do you need? I asked. Let them think they've won. The next afternoon, I did exactly that. When Ethan returned with new documents, I nodded weakly. Bring the papers, I whispered. Leela nearly smiled. With a shaking hand, I signed each page, every transfer, every authorization. Fake, worthless, carefully crafted by Claire to appear real. Ethan exhaled in relief. Thank you, Mom. As soon as they left, celebration erupted downstairs. We did it, Leela shouted. Everything's ours. Ethan popped a bottle of champagne. To my dear mother, he sneered. May she finally rest in peace. They clinked glasses beneath the camera's lens. I'm calling the bank tomorrow, Leela said, before she dies. Good, Ethan replied, no complications. I sent the video to Claire. Her response was immediate, perfect. They believed my signature had sealed their future, but what they didn't know was that the police were already on their way. The night after I signed the papers, I slept better than I had in days. Not because I felt safe, but because I knew the end was finally approaching. By morning, my phone vibrated softly beneath the pillow. A single message from Claire Donovan appeared on the screen. He's in custody, he talked. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. The man Ethan had hired, the one meant to speed things up, had been arrested before he could ever set foot in my house. According to Claire, fear loosened his tongue quickly. Text messages, bank transfers, recorded calls. Every road led back to my son. An hour later, 2 detectives knocked at the front door. From the upstairs camera feed, I watched Ethan answer confidently, his posture relaxed until he saw their badges. Ethan Holloway, one asked. Yes, his voice wavered. We'd like to ask you some questions. Color drained from his face. Leela appeared behind him, gripping his arm. What's this about? A man named Aaron Pike, the detective continued. Do you know him? Ethan shook his head too fast. No. Never heard of him. That's interesting, the detective said calmly, because he claims you paid him $10,000 to administer lethal medication to your mother. Silence. That's insane, Ethan snapped. He's lying. We have phone records, the detective replied. 17 calls, text messages, bank transfers. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. We'll be in touch, the detective finished. Don't leave town. When the door closed, Ethan exploded. Damn it, he shouted. That idiot panicked, Leela paced wildly. They're going to arrest us. They have nothing solid, Ethan insisted. By the time this goes anywhere, she'll be dead. Dead, the word echoed through my chest. That night, Claire returned with a thick folder. Ethan has been stealing from you for 2 years, she said bluntly. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, over $300,000. I felt sick but not surprised. And that's just what we've found so far. The next morning, Ethan came to my room again. How are you feeling, Mom? He asked carefully. Very tired, I whispered. I don't think I'll last the day. Relief washed over his face. Then maybe it's best if you rest. After he left, I heard him say to Leela in the hallway, Tonight, I'm done waiting. I immediately called Claire. They're moving, I said. So are we, she replied. As night fell, I realized Ethan wasn't just planning my death anymore. He was racing against the law. And desperation makes people dangerous. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the house felt charged like the air before a storm. Ethan and Leela thought they were ahead of everyone, ahead of the police, ahead of the law, ahead of death itself. That confidence made them careless, exactly as Claire had predicted. That evening, Dr. Samuel Brooks arrived for another checkup. In front of Ethan and Leela, he wore the same somber expression he'd perfected. "She's deteriorating rapidly," he said. 24 hours, 48 at most. Leela covered her mouth. "Oh God," Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, pretending to comfort her while barely hiding his relief. After Dr. Brooks left, Ethan leaned close to me. "If you're tired, Mom," he whispered, "we can increase your medication, keep you comfortable." I met his eyes weakly. "Whatever you think is best, son." The words tasted like poison. That night, they didn't even bother to hide their celebration. Through the living room camera, I watched Ethan uncork another bottle of champagne, this one from my private collection, saved for anniversaries that would never come. "To freedom," he announced. "To finally being done with her," Leela added, laughing. They sprawled across my couch like royalty, paperwork spread across the table. "Tomorrow morning," Ethan said, tapping the documents, "we transfer everything, before anyone can interfere." "And if something goes wrong?" Leela asked. Ethan smirked. "It won't. She won't wake up." At midnight, Claire texted me, "Everyone S in position." I lay still, heart pounding, not with fear but anticipation. At 9 the next morning, Ethan entered my room with forced tenderness. "Mom," he said softly, "we've arranged a small family gathering, just in case." "Who?" I asked faintly. "Uncle Victor," he replied reluctantly. "You asked to see him." He didn't know Claire had already invited more than family. By noon, the living room filled with people Ethan hadn't expected, 3 notaries, 2 attorneys, and the same detectives who had questioned him the day before. "What's going on?" he demanded. I stood up, no trembling, no weakness, his face drained of color. "I'm not dying," I said calmly. "And I never was." Claire stepped forward. "We're here to read Margaret Holloway's will." The screen behind her lit up, and Ethan's own voice filled the room. "To my dear mother, may she rest in peace very soon." Leela screamed. The detectives moved in. As handcuffs clicked shut around my son's wrists, I realized the hardest part wasn't justice, it was watching the truth destroy what little remained of him. The room erupted in chaos. Leela screamed first, sharp, panicked animal. Ethan stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing as if words might save him if he could just find the right ones. You planned this," he stammered, pointing at me. "You lied to us." I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "I told you the truth, Ethan, you just didn't care to hear it." The detectives stepped forward. One of them gently but firmly took Ethan by the arm. "Ethan Holloway, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." "This is insane," Leela shouted. "She manipulated everything." Claire Donovan didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Ms. Holloway exaggerated her medical condition after hearing her son celebrate her death," she said calmly. "That is not manipulation, that is self-defense." The lead detective nodded. "We have recorded conversations, financial records, witness testimony, and a confession from the man you hired." Leela's knees buckled. She grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "Tell them it was your idea," she whispered frantically. "Tell them you forced me." Ethan ripped his arm away. "Forced you? You were the one counting the money before she was even dead." The notaries scribbled furiously. Uncle Victor Hale stood off to the side, his face pale with shock. "Ethan," he said quietly, "what have you done?" Ethan's eyes filled with rage. "She ruined everything," he spat, glaring at me. "All of this could have been avoided if she'd just let go." "Let go?" My voice trembled, but not with weakness. "You mean let you kill me?" Silence fell like a guillotine. The detectives led them out as neighbors began gathering outside, drawn by flashing lights and raised voices. Cameras appeared. Phones recorded. By evening, my house, my sanctuary, had become a crime scene. The trial began 6 weeks later. Ethan sat at the defense table, thinner now, his arrogance replaced by something brittle and desperate. Leela sat beside him, avoiding my eyes entirely. The prosecutor was ruthless. He played the recordings, every laugh, every toast, every casual mention of my death as an inconvenience. Jurors stared in disbelief as Ethan's voice filled the courtroom. "I don't want to wait the full 3 days." Leela sobbed openly when the bank records were displayed, hundreds of thousands siphoned from my accounts over years. Ethan's attorney tried everything. "Stress," he argued. "Debt, poor judgment under pressure." I took the stand. "Did you ever give your son permission to access your accounts?" The prosecutor asked. "No." "Did you ever agree to transfer your assets to him while alive?" "No." "Did you hear him celebrate the idea of your death?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. With joy, Ethan wouldn't look at me. Leela took a plea deal the next day. She testified against him. He planned it, she cried. The money, the man, everything, I was afraid. The recordings proved otherwise, but the deal stood. When the jury returned, they didn't hesitate, guilty on all counts. Ethan collapsed into his chair. As he was led away, he turned back to me. You were supposed to protect me, he said hoarsely. I did, I replied softly, from becoming worse than you already were. Justice had been served, but as the courtroom emptied, I realized winning the case didn't mean winning back my son, and the final verdict would cost me more than I ever imagined. Sentencing day arrived quietly. No cameras this time, no shouting. Just the low murmur of a courtroom weighed down by consequences. Ethan stood in an orange jumpsuit, hands clasped in front of him. He no longer looked like the confident man who had once toasted my death. Prison had already begun to carve lines into his face, lines of regret, anger, and something dangerously close to self-pity. The judge didn't soften his tone. Ethan Holloway, he said, you exploited trust, attempted to end a life for personal gain, and showed no remorse until you were. This court sentences you to 25 years. A gasp rippled through the room. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. Leela wasn't there. She had already been sentenced 8 years, reduced for cooperation. She had avoided my gaze on her way out weeks earlier, clutching the illusion that testifying against Ethan somehow cleansed her hands. It didn't. As Ethan was led away, he finally looked at me, not with rage this time, but fear. Mom, he whispered. Please. I said nothing. Some words once spoken cannot be unsaid. Some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. Life after the trial was quieter than I expected, too quiet. The house felt hollow without footsteps echoing down the halls, without even the tension that had once poisoned every room. I sold it within a month. Too many memories, too many whispers. I moved into a modest lakeside home, far from the city, far from anyone who knew my name or my fortune. For the first time in decades, I lived simply. Then one afternoon, Claire Donovan arrived unannounced. There's something you need to know, she said carefully, setting a file on the table. Inside were documents I had never seen. Your late husband, she continued, set up a private trust years ago, one Ethan never knew about. I frowned. Why didn't I? Because it was conditional, she said. And the condition has now been met. The trust had been designed as a safeguard, released only if my assets were threatened from within the family. My husband had seen something in Ethan long before I had. The amount made my breath catch. But attached to the paperwork was a handwritten letter. Margaret, if you're reading this, then our son has become the man I feared he might. I'm sorry you had to face this alone. Use this money not to punish, but to protect yourself. And forgive yourself for loving too deeply. Tears blurred the page. That night I sat by the lake, letter folded in my hands, watching the water ripple under moonlight. I had won. I was safe, I was free, and yet my heart ached with a grief no verdict could erase. The next morning my phone rang, a prison number. I let it ring, then I answered. As I lifted the phone to my ear, I knew whatever Ethan was about to say could either break me or finally set me free. I stared at the phone long after I had answered it, listening to the faint hum on the other end. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Mom, Ethan finally said. His voice sounded smaller, stripped of authority. Stripped of entitlement. Yes, I replied calmly. I didn't think you'd pick up. I didn't think I would either. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything that had been said in court and everything that never had. They treat me like a monster here, he said quietly. I closed my eyes. You tried to kill me, Ethan. I know, he whispered. I replay it every night. I don't recognize myself anymore. There it was, the line I'd waited for. Not an apology, not yet. Just self-pity wrapped in regret. You always wanted more, I said. More money, more status, more approval, and no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. I was drowning, he said sharply. You controlled everything. I felt invisible. That's not true, I replied. You felt entitled. His breath hitched. Maybe, but I loved you. I said nothing. Love that demands your death is not love. I heard about the trust, he added suddenly. My jaw tightened. Then you heard wrong. I know I'm not getting it, he said quickly. That's not why I called. Then why did you? Another pause, longer this time. I need you to tell me something, he said. Did you ever regret having me? The question cut deeper than any betrayal. No, I answered without hesitation. I regret not seeing you clearly sooner. I regret confusing protection with love. His voice cracked. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I said gently. Because forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something I decide. We sat in silence again. Then I heard a guard's voice in the background. I have to go, Ethan said, but thank you for answering. Goodbye, Ethan. The line went dead. I didn't cry, not then. Later that evening, I walked down to the lake, the same letter from my husband folded neatly in my coat pocket. The water reflected the fading sky, calm and unbothered by human mistakes. I realized something important in that moment. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean returning access to your life. It means releasing yourself from the weight of someone else's choices. The next morning, I made a final decision. I rewrote my will. Everything, every property, every account, every asset was placed into charitable trusts, shelters for abused elders, legal aid funds, medical advocacy groups. No bloodlines, no conditions, just purpose. As I signed the final document, Claire looked at me with quiet respect. "You're sure?" she asked. "I've never been more certain," I replied. That night I slept without fear for the first time in years. I thought the story was over, but one final letter, delivered weeks later, would force me to confront the one truth I had been avoiding all along. The letter arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. No warning, no return address. Just my name, Margaret Holloway, written in careful, uneven handwriting that I recognized immediately. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was from Ethan. The paper was thin, creased, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times before it ever reached me. "Mom, they say writing helps you face the truth. I don't know if that's true, but I know silence hasn't helped me at all. I spend my days thinking about the moment I chose money over you. I tell myself it wasn't really me, that fear made me do it, but fear doesn't plant ideas. It only reveals what's already there." I sat down slowly, my breath shallow. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know something before too much time passes. When I said you controlled my life, I was wrong. You protected me from consequences, from myself. And when that protection disappeared, I showed you who I really was." Tears blurred the words, but I kept reading. "I don't know if I'll ever become someone worth forgiving, but if there's even a small chance I can change, it will be because you stopped saving me. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you, not because I got caught, but because I finally understand what I almost destroyed. Your son, Ethan." I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. For the first time since the accident, I cried, not from betrayal, not from anger, but from acceptance. Some losses are permanent. Some lessons come too late. And some love survives only by letting go. Spring arrived quietly that year. I spent my mornings walking by the lake, watching families feed ducks, listening to laughter drift across the water. No one knew who I was. No one cared how much I owned, or once owned. And that anonymity felt like freedom. The charitable foundations began their work within months. Legal clinics opened for elderly women facing exploitation. A medical advocacy program bore my husband's name. Lives were changed quietly without headlines, exactly how he would have wanted it. One afternoon, Victor Hale visited me. "You did the right thing," he said gently. "Not everyone is brave enough to choose meaning over legacy." I smiled. "Legacy isn't about who inherits your money, it's about who benefits from your courage." That evening, I placed Ethan's letter beside my husband's in a small wooden box and locked it away, not to forget, but to remember without pain. I didn't know if I would ever answer Ethan, and for once I was at peace with uncertainty. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized the truth I had been running from: survival isn't the opposite of loss. Sometimes it's the result of it. I had lost a son not to prison, not to greed, but to the moment he chose who he wanted to be. And I had survived not by revenge, not by wealth, but by choosing who I wanted to become. That was what remained.